Bonjour, bonjour, and welcome. I hope this webinar finds everyone happily rested. And if not, hopefully this webinar offers you some support and solution. I think sleep is such an interesting thing insofar as everyone does it. And yet those that struggle with it, usually it's for very different reasons. So to kick off the evening, I'd love to welcome the brilliant clinicians in the singular feline who's going to be helping our conversations today. So as we all know, we have our proud favorites, Dr. Laura and Justin, and occasionally you're going to see a tail. Her name is Nipita. She truly runs the show. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to chatting through all things that are sleep and all that can be the problems of getting to sleep, because I think everyone knows how important sleep is. And I think what is lost a little bit in that is when you're struggling with sleep, the why behind that and how varied the reasons can be for that. Rarely is it that we ever see the same someone with insomnia coming in and it being because of the same reason. Do you guys agree?
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wonder today if to the end of exploring this, we start talking about different cases, different people that have come into our practice, all with the same complaint of, I can't sleep. And I wonder if we could dig into partially the reasons behind and then separately the fixes too, because I'm always inspired and amazed by the different fixes that you guys can offer. You each have such an individual approach based on the why, how to fix it and what to do. And so I wonder, maybe we jump into some cases today. Does that make sense?
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, might as well.
I love it. Yeah, no, please. And just as a quick shout out before I introduce the first case, hello to everyone. I love that in the chat. It's become also a tradition within people who join this. So shouting out where they're from. And so we're seeing it from all the corners of the world. We're seeing Australia. We're seeing there's a Canadian in the house. Someone said Antarctica. And if that is true, you officially win the crown. You win the crown of where people are calling in from. All right, so why don't we start with our first case? All right, so, and this will be kind of a general case that I think a lot of people at one point in their life can empathize with. So we have a woman, early 40s. From a hormonal perspective, she's doing pretty good, okay? But she really, really is struggling with sleep, right? So her health, you do a full health checkup, and there's nothing concerning, right? In the sense of, you've done her blood work, you've done all the fun things. There's nothing concerning, but she's struggling both to fall asleep and stay asleep. Yeah. Why don't we dig into this case? Because I think this is a case that a lot of people at one point in their life can empathize with. So where do you start? What sort of questions are you asking before you even get to the treatment plan? Like, how are you trying to figure out why she isn't able to sleep and get that good sleep in there?
Well, I would say, first of all, when it comes to the DNA 360 profile, I don't think that there's one aspect of that mood and behavior section that is not relevant here. For example, the not being able to fall asleep component. I would have to look at your noradrenaline pathway. Some people are just overthinking. I'm very guilty of that, trying to decipher the universe at midnight when I should be shutting down my nervous system. It tends to kind of charge up. The dopamine profile, very relevant there. Are you a binger? Do you have an addictive personality? So are you thinking about those kinds of things prior to bed? Are you dysregulated for serotonin and your brain just can't prioritize stimulus properly, where it's like trying to sleep with one eye open, because your brain is perceptive when it's actually dysregulated for serotonin, such that you're noticing every little thing, a little bit of light bleeding in through the window, a smell, a siren in the distance. And then BDNF, that's the fourth pathway that we look at there. And it's very important for your capacity to fall asleep, stay asleep. So the way your brain works is certainly the first component of that. Dr. Laura, what would you kind of add to that?
Actually, I would also look at their vitamin D pathway. That's very important when it comes to circadian rhythm. And so honestly, it's like when I have the person sitting in front of me, obviously, we all are, we clinicians in the DNA company, we've looked at your DNA profile. So we already have some ideas where some issues could arise. But then when you're actually sitting in front of us, we're starting to ask more questions. And generally, I will ask, walk me through your routine. What does your sleep hygiene look like? And so, I may initially start in the early evening. What time did you eat your meal? What kinds of foods are you eating? What does, are you looking at screens? What's the temperature of your room? Is your room like a Zen garden, or is it a trashed mess?
Yeah.
So many little aspects that can actually play a factor into how well you actually prepare yourself for sleep, because there's a lot of wonderful little pearls that can come forth in that description of walking through. And then, I may throw in some questions like, what type of mattress are you sleeping on? Is it a Sleep Number bed, or is it an organic, natural type of mattress? So many different aspects that a lot of times the person doesn't think of. And then I will even work into, what does your morning look like? How do you generally wake up and start the day? Because a good night's sleep doesn't start in the evening, it actually starts in the morning. So it's really asking them about, where are you at? What are you doing?
I love that thought that you're offering there, because I think a lot of time when people are struggling with sleep, right, they know how it impacts their day. They know that they're going to wake up fatigued and grouchy and all the things. But I think that's not, they really only start to think about, how do I get better sleep? Those moments before they go to bed. They forget that the beautiful hormone and neurotransmitter cascade that sets us up for that bedtime starts the moment they wake up. I like that you're kind of pulling it back there and growing awareness that what we do during the day will shift how we go about our nighttime routine. Yeah. So for this person, for this woman who says, I really struggle with falling asleep. I'm awake too long, right? What are, assuming again, there's nothing medically wrong, what are your first go-to tips, either something during the day or something at night? What are your favorite tips there for this person here?
So there's a couple of ways that I would go about that. I mean, there's everything from dietary strategies, which what I personally do for that is something called carb backloading, which I've found to be pretty effective. Of course, we would have to see, how does your body metabolize starches versus fats, but a pretty good strategy. And especially if this individual in question, our Jane Doe, happened to be dysregulated for serotonin, one way that you can help transition into sleep is to have more of a state of, let's call it fatty acid oxidation throughout the day, and then load those carbohydrates at night, like predominantly in your evening meal. It tends to be your more social meal anyways, but to have your insulin fairly suppressed all day long and then kind of spike it up a couple hours prior to bed with a carbohydrate meal, then it starts to lower and all of a sudden you're yawning, you're ready to go to bed. So it tends to make you tired, and it helps to kind of transition that. So even your dietary strategy can play some roles here. I would also ask about, for example, workout time. If you happen to be one of these people that trains a little bit too late in the day, the cortisol component can really stay elevated for a little while, and you can still be really charged up. So the difference between a 5 p.m. workout and a 7:30 p.m. workout can really translate there. So as you mentioned, Dr. Varden, it's the totality of the circadian rhythm. What time are you waking up? Are you looking at the horizon in the morning as well as in the evening when the sun is at that low solar angle? All these little extrapolations from there. But yeah, from there, I would ask about supplements and all kinds of things. But eating and then the light, the exercising, all of that is really relevant there.
And I'm going to refer back to something, Justin, that you had said about looking at the mood and behavior aspect, looking at some of those genes. Do they tend to ruminate more? How is their serotonin regulation? And I would ask this Jane Doe, when you lay your head on the pillow and you are finding it hard to fall asleep, what's going on? Are you thinking about the day? Are you having issues, replaying a situation or a problem at work, or an argument with a friend or a spouse, or, oh, I forgot to do this, and your whole list of things to do that you didn't get to? What exactly is happening that you can't fall asleep? Because based on that answer, and I will say, I have many clients who fall into this, and they're like, I can't make my head stop. I can't stop thinking. I can't stop worrying. And I'll tell you, I've been there. I still can go there.
We are Jane Doe. We are Jane
Right.
Doe.
But it's recognizing, that this is happening, and then implementing techniques to help with it. And a lot of what I tell them is have a journal. Have a journal next to the bed. Obviously there are things that, we can kind of back up and do before you go to sleep to help. But to have a journal at the side of the bed, because if there is a worry, a concern, a frustration that's in the brain, we need to take it out of the brain and put it on paper. It's not going to go anywhere, but you can remove that worry from the head. And writing it down, whether it be little notes or, oh, I forgot this and I don't want to forget, that can really be bothersome. It's like, oh, I can't forget to do this tomorrow. Well, if it stays in your head, then you're going to constantly worry. So get it on the paper and, just write it down. And that way, good. I don't have to think about it. It's right there. It'll be there for me in the morning. In conjunction, having some sort of prayer, meditation before bed, because I have no qualms to say, I believe in God, whomever you happen to believe in, whatever you happen to call, God, a source, but I believe in a higher power. And that higher power loves me and wants me to do well. And if there's a really difficult concern or an issue that I just don't have an answer for, first of all, I'll write it down in the journal. And then I will also pray and say, please take these concerns and worries from me. Allow me to sleep tonight so I can be fresh and at my best in the morning to be able to take that problem over again and have the solutions to then work with it. But I need to rest now. And I'll tell you, that is so powerful and helps so much. So just those two simple things can make a huge difference. And then there's a lot of other techniques that can be employed, even before you lay your body on the bed. But I think those two are very impactful.
Yeah, no, I value and I appreciate that. And I think also like some supplemental to prayer for those who aren't, of that kind of consciousness of let me articulate a prayer. I think there's also other things that can be done to calm down the nervous system, right? I think one of my more favored ones offering people is a lot of breath work and breathing techniques, right? Because with breath, we're able to shift where our nervous system sits, right? A lot of these anxious thoughts get us into a space of the nervous system that is not allowing for that rest. And so with different breathing techniques, right, as well as that distraction of let me go through that breath work, right, there can be a little bit of a shift of the nervous system and a little bit of an easeful space with which sleep can come. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Do either of you have a favorite breath technique that you suggest specifically before bed, right? Because different breathing techniques can jazz up the body in different ways.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a fan of a few. And you need to be aware of what the nervous system impact is, right? Of the type of breath you choose. Like in the morning, I'll do all kinds of alternate nostril breath and alkaline breath, things that are more about upregulating the nervous system and really targeting some more sympathetic activity. So in the evening, I don't want that. Like I'm already one of those dudes who's kind of an overthinker as it is, and that's in my genetic profile. So box breath, right? 4-4-4-4 is great. 4-7-8 is great. I also really enjoy that 1 minute breath. It's like 20-20-20. More difficult than you might think because you're only taking one full breath per minute, right? So it takes a little bit of concentration to do that. But understand that if we were placed in some sort of a traumatic circumstance, the default breathing pattern would be very rapid. It would be through the mouth. You'd be really loading up on carbon dioxide. So we want to do pretty much the polar opposite of that. We want to calm everything down and we want to get the heart rate down. This is also valuable, by the way, if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night. Sometimes that can be a cortisol issue, right? So cortisol is not supposed to peak until like 6 a.m., when the blue light starts to rise. A lot of people, it'll raise in the middle of the night. If let's say you go to bed with too much on your mind or whatever, 2 a.m, your cortisol spikes, your liver releases glucose, and you wake up with a sugar high effectively. So your heart rate will even be a little bit elevated. And that's where practicing some box breath or something to calm it back down can help you transition back to sleep a little bit quicker than that. Dr. Varden, what do you do for that?
Actually, you hit upon them. One of the most important things is to have your out breath being longer than your in breath, because that is what gets the heart rate to slow down to actually stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. So whether it's like the 4-7-8 or the box breath, I mean, granted that, is of equal counts, but you are doing some holding of the breath, at each. Really, it all comes down to stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, relaxing and slowing the heart rate. I will say, getting into, with breath, but using some devices, I love my brain tap. I do that every night. And with a lot of the sleep ones that they have, you do some breathing. They do some guided breathing and meditation, as you do it. But I'll tell you, I fall asleep every time. I don't think I've ever gotten through to the end of a session, and they're probably around 20 minutes. So yeah, definitely love the brain tap.
Yeah. I wonder if we can explore other cues, even other cues that the body can take outside of kind of some of this mental and breath work, that will trigger the body to kind of recognize, hey, it's time for bed. So for example, maybe we talk about the room temperature. Maybe we talk in particular about how our core body needs to drop a few degrees to signal the brain, to signal some sleep. Does anyone want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I'll take that one just because it relates back to the ancestral mechanism. And we all know that I'm a dork for primal, right? Primal health is a lot of what my background is. So
get your glasses. You can't be a dork without the glasses.
I do have some red light glasses somewhere. I can't remember where I put them. But let's assume that our ancestors would have slept on the ground in a cave, let's call it. And we can operate under the assumption that because the earth gets colder when the sun is on the other side of the earth, that they would have been sleeping on relatively cold ground. There's that mechanism there that it's supposed to drop by, 1 to 3 degrees. I think you said, Dr. K, that's what it is.
2 to 3.
Yeah, and that transitions you into those deeper states of sleep. So if you sleep and you're really hot, you can still sleep, but you might only get into those really light stages of sleep. So, we talk about the totality of the number, this 8-hour recommendation, which I think is fairly accurate, but the actual quality, right, and the different layers of sleep that you're able to get your body into matter a lot there. And temperature, light, these are the different mechanisms that your body really, uses to get there. So I think it's related to the sleeping in caves and being on the cold ground. That's always just been my opinion on that one.
And there's this great little remembrance of things is you warm up to cool down to fall asleep, because you want to, like taking a warm bath, you are dilating the blood vessels, the capillaries, so that way your body can actually cool down and get your core temperature to drop that 2 or 3 degrees. So warm up to cool down to fall asleep. Stay cool to stay asleep. And then warm up to wake up. And this works into that natural cycle, and, the coldest part of the day is usually those wee hours of the morning right before sunrise. And then it starts warming up with the bright light, with the warmth. Then we become invigorated and start waking up. So it is warm up to cool down to fall asleep, stay cool to stay asleep, and warm up to wake up.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And you would, Bryce would so joyfully love what you've just said, because I think he speaks often about the need for us to cool down in order to properly engage with the lymphatic system, in order to properly detox and make the best of sleep. So I like this idea of being very mindful of the temperature within the room, because not only does it enable better sleep, i.e. ability to fall asleep, it makes the most of it while you are asleep. Yeah, so before we move on to our next example person, I wonder, when we welcomed everyone in, we asked they fill out some surveys, because part of what we want to do at this time is make sure we're speaking to you and speaking to the issues that you care about and have come plainly to talk to us about. So we've now pulled up these fun little polls, and so a lot of the audience here, while they're not struggling, or sorry, a lot of the audience, I apologize, unsurprisingly is struggling with actually falling asleep. And they have current sleep issues. So it's very topical that we're all here. Please make sure you're offering some of those thoughts in the question section. We will, a little bit later on, allow people to raise their hands so that you can vocalize what's going on. Okay. Now the next best thing, and I saw this a little bit echoed in the chat when Justin spoke to it, so maybe we pause and talk about this for a little bit. When we asked why you're struggling, most people here are able to fall asleep, so they're kind of disregarding everything that we've said so far, but they're struggling to stay asleep. And what an epidemic that is, because I think that's a very common complaint we hear. So I wonder if either of you kind of want to go into, maybe Justin, you do, because you've alluded to it a little bit, go into kind of some of the body mechanisms that happen when someone's waking up. And I do want to qualify one thing. In particular for females, those that are perimenopause or approaching menopause or menopausal, a lot of that will influence your capacity to sleep and wake up. We have done different webinars on this. So we're going to pop those links into the chat so you can access them. And so to an extent, we're not going to acknowledge those here, not because they don't exist or they're not important, but because that's so complex and a subject matter unto itself, it deserves its own webinar. So please do click into those. Okay, so let's speak to that, independent of menopause and all the glory that is that change of life for females. Justin, why don't you talk to why some people wake up in the middle of the night?
Yeah, so it's once again, there's this totality of the circadian rhythm, right? So we have times when cortisol is supposed to peak. We have times when melatonin is supposed to peak, typically like, 10 p.m., give or take in there. Sleep also happens in more than one cycle, right? It happens in these 90-minute chunks. So especially, like I already spoke to the cortisol component, and that's where the gratitude journaling, et cetera, would come in, right? To lower that, hopefully. If it's not cortisol and it might be serotonin, that's because of that perceptiveness that I mentioned earlier. And I'm going to go ahead and go primal again. In our ancestors' day, someone had to get up in the middle of the night to check that rustling in the bushes, right? Or check that smoke in the distance, or whatever it might have been, some kind of danger, be it acute or not. So someone had to do that. Now, modern day, it's more of a problem because if we happen to be dysregulated in serotonin, we just can't shut it down again. Like your brain is almost looking for reasons to stay awake. And I suspect that that's really common because even if you have genetically good serotonin, so many of us are running around with like leaky gut syndrome, issues with serotonin, right? So that it ends up being lower. So, sleep architecture, where you sleep, it's got to be dark, it's got to be cold. You've got to feel safe as well. So like gravity blankets, for example, it's actually part of the serotonin mechanism that is touching on, right? Because when your mom tucked you in when you were a kid, you had that feeling of safety because something was pressing down on you, giving you a little bit of pressure. So stuff like that, you need to feel safe. You need to have your mind clear of things that might spike cortisol. One other thing that I normally do for that is I have this thing. Of course, I have this thing because we're biohackers. It's called a sleep induction mat. So it actually operates on acupuncture principles. And I lay on it prior to bed for like, 10 minutes or so. And you lay on these spikes and your body like freaks out for a second, because it's like, oh my gosh, we're getting stabbed in multiple areas. So it actually kicks on that fight or flight response. But then after a few minutes, your body kind of recognizes that we're actually okay. And you relax down into those spikes and it actually turns it back off now. And it's very low tech. It's a mat covered in little plastic spines. So things like that, and the gravity blanket, the breathing. I'm also a big fan of using things like GABA cream, for example. You can actually get that now, like transdermal GABA cream, because it's way quicker acting than a capsule. And you just kind of smear it on your neck or whatever, and it really gives your brain more GABA to work with pretty quickly. So there's all these different moving neurotransmitters that can keep you up, know what their inhibitors are, and know how to shut it down. It might be cortisol, it might be GABA related, it might be noradrenaline related, or serotonin related. So we have little hacks, and this is where knowing your genes is very useful, because then we know what hack to apply for what issue effectively.
I agree with that. I think when people are approaching sleep, there can be so many different causes. And I think we've beautifully articulated so far some of the brain-based reasons, right? But we haven't attacked other reasons, be it ability to process environmental toxins, be it, your relationship with food, be it hormones, etc. Right? There's so many other things that can feed into this. And so I think it's helpful to know, especially from a genetic perspective, where there's susceptibility and how then you can go about attacking it. Okay. So guys, so Justin's helped us out a little bit insofar as he said, like, here's the why. Here's why sometimes people are waking up, right? We know sometimes like maybe different neurochemicals that'll enable that, different stresses throughout the day, right? It's always tricky when you kind of wake up and then your mind grabs onto something. So why don't we talk about how do we support people? So most of our audience here tonight, they're waking up at 2, 3, 4 a.m. being like, cool, still supposed to be asleep. What do you tell people the moment they wake up? Like, what are some strategies? What are some plans that you can offer them in the moment or in the following day? Because remember, sleep is not always addressed in the moment. Sleep needs to be addressed during the day. But what are some of those things that you guys are talking through and offering people?
Well, I would say in the moment, if they're waking up and just kind of laying there, if you are laying there awake enough and are not able to drift back off to sleep within, say, 20 to 30 minutes, then I suggest getting out of bed. Don't be turning on any bright lights. This is where red lights or something, so you're not stubbing your toe on the nearest dresser or running into a door jamb, but go into another room, whether it's on the couch, whether it's on the chair, and listen to some soft music, or look at a book in either a candlelight or some sort of very soft light until you start feeling drowsy again. Because one thing is that you do not want your body to be laying in the bed and just laying there, not sleeping. Your brain has to realize the bed is for sleep, not for TV watching, not for scrolling on the phone, not for all of these other things. Just like you wouldn't sit at a table waiting to get hungry. Don't lay in your bed waiting to get sleepy. So the location is important. So again, don't do anything too stimulating. If you're reading a book, don't have any, like nail biting, whodunit book. Get an old textbook, something that would put you to sleep. But
I have Orgo and Biochem textbooks if anyone wants them. I can send them to you.
exactly. So, or like I said, soft music, or even, a podcast or something to where you can just start to feel like you're drifting off again. And when you do, then go back to bed. So that's often something. There's also the fact, and I do have some clients where a little bit of melatonin can help at that time. A couple few milligrams just to help, especially if it's like getting to be an hour or more and you're like, I really need sleep because I have to get up and go to work in the morning, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes that can help. But again, that's not something I would initially jump to. But that's something that I have found with clients has been helpful.
I like that. And I wonder, another strategy I also have with people is doing a workup around blood sugars, right? Because sometimes when people are waking up in the middle of the night, it's not stress related, it's not sex starved hormone related.
Hypoglycemic.
Exactly. It's especially as we get older and insulin regulation becomes a little bit more tenuous, right? What can happen is there's a blood sugar drop, right? And of consequence to that, the body kind of wakes up, right? It's that startling. The body is very much attuned to what is going on. And if there's a marked shift, right, that sets off some minor alarms. And so sometimes I'll find people, especially as they get older and they start to lose some of this blood sugar control, right? They'll not necessarily have the best meal before bed. And I mean that in the sense of not strategic in support of blood sugars, right? They'll go to bed, they'll be fine, they'll crash, and that will wake them up. So it's not per se a cortisol thing in that, like, it's not a true kind of like panicked cortisol as Justin referred to, as Dr. Lara has referred to, but it's dropping and the body's waking them up saying, hey, you got to get food. You gotta level me off, right? So I think working up blood sugars becomes very important. Strategies around the last meal and potentially even a snack before you go to bed. And sometimes I also find people with kind of that blood sugar dysregulation, especially as they're learning to manage it and support themselves, even a small snack when they're waking up in that quiet time, as Dr. Lara has just articulated. During that time, sometimes a small snack can also be helpful. Right, there's lots of different strategies here, and I would offer, we're just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall here. I think there's a lot of intelligence knowing your genes and working very pointedly with a practitioner to make sure you're addressing the right thing. Yeah.
And I do want to mention that a lot of the things that we are talking about, they're not so new. They're not so novel, but there's a reason why we're talking about it, is because they are foundational. These things are old, are, through antiquity of that we are re-experiencing and verbalizing in the culture we have today, because they are foundational. Genetically speaking, all mammals sleep in some way that is conserved throughout the species. There's a reason for it. If we have evolved in so many different ways, but still need sleep, we shouldn't ignore that fact. There's a reason for it. And oftentimes we get hung up at looking at the newest, shiniest device and all of these other things, which are fantastic. And hey, I'm a biohacker. I love that too. but we should never underestimate looking at the basics, going back to the foundations, because oftentimes if we get so busy trying to tweak and dial in and, oh, this device and this device, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. We just do not want to overlook the simplicity of the mattress that you're sleeping on, the temperature of the room you are in, the sounds. Are you in an environment that is mold? Are you breathing in that mold at night and increasing your toxic burden? Are you getting sunlight in the morning? Again, if you have all of those things solid, great, move on and, keep dialing in. But if you work those foundations, a lot of the issues you have will be worked out downstream.
I echo that. I think a lot of people come to us expecting these very sexy breakthrough things, and we do really wonderful, glorious science with our genes, and our biohacking skills are unprecedented, but none of that replaces kind of the basics of cool environment, dark environment, de-stress before. Yeah. I wonder if we can continue on, and I wonder, instead of kind of digging into some more cases, let's dig into some of the questions we're seeing in the question area box, and Deborah has one that I think often comes to us, right? So Deborah is asking, she works shift work, night shifts, so something that does not easily enable kind of the schedule. The first thing we would say when people are having sleep struggles, right? One of the first things we say is, what's your sleep schedule and how do we stick to it? If you're one of those shift workers and you don't have ability to kind of have that consistent sleep schedule, she's asking for suggestions. She's also asking for supports. And I hear this a lot, do I take melatonin? Do I take other supplements? Should I get medication? Kind of, where do I go with this? So I wonder, when someone comes into you and there's someone supporting, or they're a shift worker, for whatever reason that might be. Thank you for your service. Someone needs to do the shift work in this world. What are your first thoughts as to supporting them? Again, assuming everything else is fine, there's no other health complication.
So I've actually had multiple clients with this exact thing, and I will say it's among the more complicated things to try and figure out, just because you're quite literally, and most people on shift work, it might be like a 2 weeks and 2 weeks. That gets laid out in various ways, but there's essentially no way for your body to get on a rhythm. We talk about these rhythms, and you're on purpose disrupting it every couple of weeks. And the 2 week window is almost exactly when your body's like, okay, now we're doing this. And as soon as it starts to get used to it, you switch it, and not just switch it, but to the exact opposite schedule. So one of the first things that I've done with all these clients that's actually been really useful is to find a way to biohack a nap. First of all, if you can utilize a yoga nidra, some PEMF, a brain tap, a new calm device, something that can purposely pull your brain into like a theta state. Theta is like just above sleep. And that's where a lot of your cellular restoration, a lot of the detox happens in that theta zone. So what I do is I have a PEMF mat. The one I personally use is from Higher Dose. There's quite a few, on there. What I like about mine is you can choose the brainwave that it's actually going to pull you into. So I choose theta, and it's a great little setting to nap, and it heats up via infrared, and you get negative ions, and it's like a good little restorative session. And then I'll utilize either the brain tap that Dr. Varden mentioned, or NuCalm, which is, said to effectively mimic like a 90-minute sleep cycle. And they use this little GABA disc thing that actually transmutes GABA right into your brain to shut down the adrenal cortex. And you can just sit there for however much time you have. So let's say you're operating on just nothing. You can shut it down for an hour. You can do 3 20-minute sessions, and you've effectively just restored a huge portion of your physiology, got it back in balance. So find some way to nap. You could elevate your feet, get it above the heart. That's got a few benefits. Yoga nidra you can find on YouTube or whatever. some kind of thing to mimic meditation, especially if you're like me and you're just way too heady to be able to friggin' meditate. These devices are very useful there. Beyond that, I do think that, for example, blood sugar regulation is, like you mentioned, Dr. K, is pretty useful here because it's going to be all over the place if your cortisol doesn't know what time to peak and what time to plummet.
Yeah.
So hacking a nap, working backwards from there on all the other physiological downsides, the blood sugar, the hormones, right? You better find some ways to improve your detox, right? Sauna, whatever it is, something to lower the cortisol when you need to, and then restore the body's capacity to recover. So if I got a really crappy sleep, let's say, I'll get up, I'll take a shot of ketones. I might take some essential amino acids to help my muscle mass so the cortisol doesn't eat me alive. I'll biohack a nap. I'll find a little breath work session and find some way to restore it. Beyond that, the tracking here is going to matter. So Oura Ring, Fitbit, whatever you use to track. Personally, I favor the Oura Ring due to its airplane mode capacity. You'll be able to find out at least what your brain is doing, and what your HRV is doing and how it's responding. You may need to do some things to keep your cardiovascular health in check if you're not sleeping well consistently due to a shift work schedule. So a supplement like Cardio Miracle, for example, delivering all kinds of anti-inflammatory nutrients all throughout your endothelium can help fix the downside of that. So you can see what I'm doing here. Like, I'm trying to target each and every little downside because you've got to make a living and this is how you're doing it. So let's work backwards. Let's try to restore your body any means necessary, and then get some naps in there to kind of fill in the gap, so to speak. You guys have anything to add to that? That's been my approach anyway.
You covered that beautifully. I do have a couple little things. It's simply because my son has done shift work at the hospital, and it's a matter of shifting the eating schedule. I mean, with your whole circadian rhythm, you are forcing it out of sync. That can make a difference. The other thing that I found that I got him that he said made a huge difference for him were blue light blocker glasses. I actually had gotten him a pair of the Viva Rays. And he said it is amazing because in the hospital, the lights are so bright. And he would just get headaches and eye strain and everything else. And of course, being on the computer when doing the notes or, whatever the case may be, that during the shift, he will wear the Viva Ray glasses throughout. And he said that has been wonderful. He said really that was a game changer for him because the headaches went away, the eye strain, big thing. Much better. And when he got home, he was able to go to sleep and sleep more readily, more easily. So, and actually, when I did a podcast with the founder and CEO of Viva Rays, and we talked about shift workers and you can biohack that with the glasses. So, definitely something to take a look at or listen to.
Yeah, I hope we link to that because I think to Justin's point, to all of our points, shift work for some is inevitable and key for the way society works. And so it's really about truly finding the hacks that work for you, and separately, and I would offer this as work you do with a clinician, understanding from a health perspective what your weaknesses are, because we know sleep founds every ounce of your health. And so if you know, for example, you're not going to be getting regular sleep, but you have a genetic risk towards cardiovascular illness, and we know sleep will increase that risk, we know we have to work doubly hard on addressing our cardiovascular wellness. Right. So I would offer people who are engaged in shift work, right? There's almost this unfortunate added task alongside kind of figuring out how do you sleep in spite of shift work, the added task of how do I know my body best? How do I work with a practitioner best, right? To address those weaknesses so they don't come to be, right? We don't want salt atop a wound. We don't want poor sleep atop a cardiovascular risk. Let's get ahead of it and get on top of that.
And I will say, all the more when you are putting pressure and working against the natural circadian rhythm by doing shift work, devices, tracking devices can be invaluable, because you can really get that almost immediate feedback on what is working and what is not. So this is where you can really lean in on technology, use it to your favor. I mean, if I were to say, if you could only have 2 devices to really follow health and wellness, I would say a sleep tracker and a continuous glucose monitor. Because if you can follow those 2 things, you can really work and tweak and fix so many other things, you know. But obviously, I like more more devices, but you know.
It'd be a fun conversation at some point in time if we stuck all of us in a room and forced us to pick our top 2. I could see some proverbial fists coming out. I wonder, along the vein of sleep work, or sorry, shift work, and kind of the struggles with sleep, we have a conversation around sleep aids, right? Because be it shift work, be it insomnia, be it, you know, whatever is causing sleep issues, right? I would offer there's a lot of supplements out on the market. There's a lot of belief that melatonin can fix everything, right? And I'm happy to kind of have a quick side conversation around melatonin, because I think it's important. The research does not back up the way most people use melatonin. But, you know, I wonder if we can talk about different sleep aids. And I say this with compassion too, because I think sometimes when people struggle with sleep, especially our crowd, right? The crowd that is very interested, invested in health, they feel like if they take medication or a sleep aid, they're failing. And so I want to also address that. So when it comes to sleep aids, let's maybe start off with supplements, right? Where are your favorite supplements when it comes to sleep, and also the timing of them, right? We've talked about sleep is not just made in those moments before you go to bed. Sleep's made during the day. So let's have a conversation about supplements and sleep.
Yeah, I have tried a heck of a lot of sleep aid, you know, quote unquote supplements, and a lot of them have some corresponding ingredients, you know, some L-theanine, some ashwagandha, some 5-HTP, all valuable, right, in their own right. I'll say that the one that's worked best for me, I'm not affiliated, I dabble, and this is the one that's shown really on my Oura Ring score consistently better on the nights that I take it, is Qualia Night from Neurohacker Collective. I ended up trying it because I've used their nootropic formula, right? So they have like their Qualia Mind product, which is their kind of daytime nootropic. And I noticed, I was like, man, this one actually is one of the more well-rounded ones. There's a lot of ingredients. The dosing is appropriate. And they had a caffeine-free version, which I favor in my nootropics. I don't need to be jittery. I just want to be focused. So I was a fan of the company already, and they make one called Qualia Night. So interestingly, it's more of a full evening nootropic. That's kind of how they actually market it. So you don't take it right before bed. You take it like with dinner, and it transitions you all throughout the evening into that kind of calm, relaxed state. It amplifies BDNF as well, a bunch of different things. And I'll say like that's made a difference of probably 4 or 5% for me personally, like on my Oura Ring daily. If I don't take it, it's like 80. If I do take it, it's like 85. And I've tracked this for a while now. So that one's really good. I'm also a fan of CBD. Now, CBD, there's actually different types, right? And the one that's actually the most associated with sleep is actually called CBN. So there's different ones within the kind of cannabinoid family.
It's the end of the day, I'll take a Cannabis.
Yeah, maybe I took one with THC today. I'm sorry if I did. So yeah, CBN is great for that. And usually with a CBD product, you want to actually take a decently sizable dose. I've only ever noticed real differences, like needle moving differences, if I take a bit more than it says on the bottle. That's not official advice I'm giving you, but I think that the general recommendation is a tad lower than you're going to need for real sleep improvements. But when I combine those two, I get a pretty friggin' good night's sleep. So CBN and then quality of night. Those two together have been really phenomenal for me.
I love that. Okay. And Dr. Lara, I wonder if you can offer some of, in particular, because I know you're very passionate, and I love this passion of supports during the day, as opposed to, you know, just proceeding. And I like Justin's regime there. I like his kind of like little thoughts as to come dinner, this is what we do to calm down. What do you do during the day, supplementally speaking, at least?
Supplements. I really try to use supplements as supplements, not as the go-to.
Yeah.
To be honest, I really would like to say that it's doing the things of getting some fresh air, getting your face in the sun, up-regulating your BDNF. You know, if you want to talk supplements into upregulation of BDNF, things like coffee berry extract, you know, even caffeine. But there are other things to help upregulate that. Exercise, you know, getting those photons from the sun, deep breathing, you know, a lot of those different things. Having good, healthful food. You know, I'll tell you, I will admit, last week ate some food that I really shouldn't have.
Good for you.
Michigan's French fries, onion rings. Oh my gosh. I felt so bloated and so awful, and my sleep sucked. I have to tell you, my Oura ring was like, what the hell are you doing? So, I mean, it really does come down to the food you put in your mouth, because the microbiome has to deal with all that. And, you know, if you're eating those kinds of foods, not only are you increasing your inflammation, putting more work on your body to clear it at night when that is the time for repair, but gas and bloating, that's not fun when you're trying to get to sleep. You know, just doing these regular, normal things that you do anyway, but making better choices, they directly affect your sleep. And this is why I say it is wonderful to have the data, some sort of tracker that can be an objective information saying, yeah, you screwed that up.
Yeah.
Because it was a big difference, you know, when getting home, eating healthier foods, you know, and just feeling better. And my sleep scores reflected that. And I just felt and woke up much better. So yeah, I mean, there are definitely some supplements that I take just for good health. Magnesium is fantastic. You know, especially with all the different types of forms, but taking it at night or taking an Epsom salt bath. That's what Epsom salt is, magnesium sulfate. Your skin will absorb the magnesium, and that actually stacking the fact of the magnesium sulfate, and in a warm bath, you are already prepping yourself to warm up, to cool down, to fall asleep. So, you know, there's also topical magnesium, which is wonderful. And I've even had people, because I actually use it, because every once in a while I will get my legs will cramp. I'll get Charlie horses in the middle of the night. Oh yeah, that'll wake you up. And B Minerals has a wonderful spray, their Instalight, that has magnesium. I'll put that on and that will help calm it down so I can go back to sleep, or using some sort of topical cream, and even putting on the bottom of your feet. That has actually shown to help increase deep sleep as well as sleep in general. So those are little hacks that I would do. I will say, exercise during the day. If you are working your muscles, working out, get yourself tired. Trust me, you will sleep better.
You sound like my brother. Whenever I say like, oh, I'm struggling sleeping, he's like, you idiot, you stand at a desk all day, you've done nothing. Leave it to my brother to call me an idiot. And he's right, like 100% he's right. One other thing I would add to supplemental considerations, and I think you lightly touched on this when you talked about biome, right? Like our biome is responsible for approximately, give or take, 70% of the serotonin and the melatonin, kind of all the fun things that go into that, the chemical bath that enables us to sleep. And so I would offer, I personally don't like the idea of, outside of the vitamin Ds or the omegas or certain core supplements, I don't like the idea of kind of always staying on the same supplement, right? I think this is where the value of a practitioner comes in. But if you know you're going into a stressful period, or you're not going to be eating properly, fueling up and supporting yourself with supplements during the day can be very helpful. In particular, a specific herbal family. It's called adaptogens. This family will they help you adapt to stress. And the interesting thing, they're always, they've historically, traditionally been studied for stress response, but the secondary action of them, and something that they're very strong within, is supporting the gut, both in gut motility and all the little friends that exist there. Because while we may not have been able to articulate it back in the day, there was a very tender awareness that gut health, gut calmness, and mind calmness all go together towards feeding sleep. And so sometimes offering kind of adaptogenic or stress support herbs during the day, especially during periods of stress, can really lend to setting you up for a better night's sleep. Okay. And before I pass the mic, because I want to make sure we get to a few other questions, someone was just asking thoughts on melatonin. I promised a little bit of a monologue on melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone. In most countries, not all, it's available over the counter. And it's something that, people will kind of take. I take small doses of it. I take large doses of it. It makes me feel groggy. It does nothing for me. It wakes me up. There's a lot of different responses to it. And from a research perspective, okay, the only instance with which melatonin sincerely helps people, okay, is going to be those that are jet lagged or shift workers or something that truly disrupts the circadian rhythm. When it comes to chronic sleep problems, right, and chronic sleep problems where melatonin deficiency is not the issue, right? It's more you're disrupting your body's capacity to make melatonin, right? Melatonin categorically does not help, right? Some people believe they've formed habits around it, and at least what the research bears out is that's more a mental dependency, for lack of better words, right? Short of some abnormality within the body that prevents you creating melatonin, right? Which is not common, right? Most people don't have that, right? You are able to, assuming the correct things during the day, make your enough melatonin to support sleep. So it's not something I often recommend for sleep, because if anything, people will tend to overdose it, and then they tend to get the melatonin hangover where they're groggy the next day. And as we talk about sleep starting the moment you wake up, that kind of sets you up for a little bit of failure there. Some people do respond to it. I don't want to deny that. Some people, it's their thing, and that's great. But by and large, it's not one of those things I suggest for people unless they're shift workers, unless there's jet lag. Okay. So just my quick thoughts there before we move on. I think I've also seen within both the chat and then the questions, there are people asking around different medications, right? Especially, should I give in and try these medications? I would offer to treat them as that, an episodic, occasional medication. I think if you're going through something big, if you're struggling to get sleep, it can become a little bit of a ball that rolls down the hill, a snowball that becomes bigger and bigger. And so sometimes a short course of a medication can be very helpful to kind of reorient you, to strip away your fear of sleep. There's some people, the chronic insomniacs of the world, knowing they have a prescription at their bedside sometimes can be very comforting, right? And will remove some of the stress of, oh, I must fall asleep right now, and kind of stressing out over all the stress techniques. So I'd say that's something to be very personalized, discussed with your doctor. And sometimes there's a role for it. It's not a failing if you need a medication. It's something that you use coupled to your health plan. For people who are really, kind of at that point where they're like, I'm grasping at medications, I can't figure it out, I would offer this We are currently beta testing a program, soft introducing a program. It's called the DNA Precision Program. And it is to the end of personalizing medicine as much as we can. It's a program where you are interviewed to understand if you're an appropriate candidate. And we take in people with very complex health issues that truly do need a supportive team, a team that understands their DNA and a team that can understand different elements of their health that doesn't just reduce it down to a doctor, right? They incorporate possibly psychotherapy. They incorporate a personal trainer. They incorporate diet and nutrition, right? For the people who are struggling with sleep and they think, you know, they're kind of at that point where they need that more personalized support, feel free to email us at ceo@thednacompany.com. Every application is overseen by our CEO, and we work with people to the end of finding the right program for them. Sometimes it's a program that already exists. Sometimes it's just an episodic visit, or sometimes it's more intensive program. But it's designed to ensure that your medicine is personalized to a T, that you're not given generic suggestions, that your suggestions are not only aligned to your DNA, but also to what's going on in your world, what you're capable of, what you're able of, and what your goals are. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say there. Let's move on to some other questions. Yeah. Oh, please let us know about this program. So August, if you want to email ceo@thednacompany.com, we can support you with some information. It's a personalized medicine program where we do an intake interview. We understand the problem and we truly assess, can we be of help? We don't just take anyone into these programs, right? The programs are to the end of, can we help this person? Right? And how do we find them that help? How do we design something that is specific to them, not just kind of a cookie cutter plan? We're really working towards the mission of personalized medicine for everyone. Okay, and so I hope that was helpful. I want to make sure we get back to some questions. I wonder, so one of the questions here in the chat, and I know both Dr. Laura and Justin in the most beautiful of ways are very specific and articulate about this. Someone is asking if we can talk a little bit about sleep cycles, what the body goes through every night, you know, kind of this idea of, do we need 8 hours? What's a sleep cycle? What does that look like? How does that fit in? And at the tail end, I want to make sure we also talk about male and female sleep, and some nuance that's kind of bubbling up, especially of recent now that we're studying men and women differently when it comes to sleep. So Dr. Laura, Justin, who wants to jump into sleep cycles?
I will.
Have fun.
This really has been a passion of mine that I have been reading and studying about, you know, even in grad school. So when we talk about sleep cycles, now really this consists of different things. It consists of non-REM, REM being rapid eye movement. Okay, so there are actually 3 different aspects or stages of non-REM sleep. And then of course you have REM sleep, that rapid eye movement. And when for the sleep cycles, these are typically about 90 minutes long. And you cycle through about 4 to 6 of them per night. Now, for these sleep cycles, they are not evenly spaced with, you know, a non-REM. And by the way, deep sleep is a non-REM. Okay, like you do not have equal amounts of deep sleep, REM, light sleep through each cycle. You actually have more deep sleep during the first part of the night, then that starts to wane and get lessened, and your REM sleep actually starts to increase. So they kind of do this flip-flop. And it's really important that if you go to sleep very, very late, that you think, oh, well, you know, I'll just kind of catch up and get that amount, you know, sleeping later in the morning. Actually, it doesn't do that quite well. That sleep debt, it's a little bit harder to make up, and you don't get the same amounts of each type of sleep cycle or the stages in each of these cycles. So with each of these, and I'm not going to bore you right now with all the particular hertz and brainwave activities, even though it's really amazing. I do follow Dr. Matthew Walker, who wrote the book, Why We Sleep. He actually is one of the advisors for the Sleep Foundation. Their website has a tremendous amount of wonderful information. If you want to nerd out more on all things sleep. But really, you can see, if you have an Oura Ring or a sleep tracker, you can actually see these chunks throughout the day or throughout the night, and how they are sectioned. And it's not going to be perfect. Again, this information is averaged. But you can start seeing the trends, and you can start seeing where you may be lacking. Because deep sleep is the time that your body does the repair. That is when you are healing, when you are really doing a lot of that work. The REM sleep, and I am generalizing this a little bit, the REM sleep is more of working out issues, of moving your short-term memory into long-term memory, and working through that old phrase when that your grandmother used to tell you when you were having difficulties and couldn't figure out an answer, and she'd say, sleep on it, sleep on it. There was a reason. Your brain and the insight is starting to work through all of that during the sleep. Again, mainly REM, but there is some in deep. So that way you have better clarity in the morning. So I'll fill in some other information and geek out a little bit more as we go, but that's pretty much the gist of sleep cycles and the particular stages within them.
Yeah. And I know that there's been a few people asking around chronotypes, and so chronotype, kind of the idea, for lack of better phrasing, there's the night owl, there's the early bird, this idea that some people come to a space where they just feel better staying up late, waking up late, or going to bed early, waking up early. And so I think what I'm hearing, Dr. Laura, and I think this often flushes out in research, there's an element of consistency, but also separate to that, kind of, unfortunately, I say this as a night owl, a little bit earlier to bed tends to be a bit more beneficial when it comes to these sleep cycles. Is that a fair statement? I'm also looking at Justin because I know you're passionate about this too.
I agree. And by the way, your chronotype can actually change throughout your life. There's I think it's just literally The Sleep Doctor is like the website that you can go to take. It's like a quiz, a little questionnaire to find out if you're a bear or a bird, or they use all these anthropomorphizations. But I'm a bear, by the way. Like I do well waking up at like 6 and going to bed by like 10. And that does help to kind of guide my behavior a little bit. And then, like I mentioned, as a teenager, and then as a middle-aged person, and then as an older person, your chronotype can and probably will change. So you can actually do the test, throughout life and have it guide your behavior. If we can determine your circadian rhythmicity that way, then we can figure out your eating window. Then we can figure out your exercise schedule, right? The whole thing should be more or less dialed in, because to Dr. Varden's point, exercising throughout the day makes it so that you fall asleep easier at night. So we should know when that initial window needs to be, because then we can just look through it and go, I'll work out here. I'll break my fast here. I'll finish my eating window here. I'll start my breath work here. I'll take my quality of night there, right? The whole thing becomes a plan once you know that initial sleep-wake cycle. So thesleepdoctor.com, I believe, is where I did that.
And I would also offer, scheduling can overcome any natural tendencies. So for example, I prefer to be a night owl, but my life does not allow for that. And there are studies that say, independent of what our preference might be when it comes to when we go to bed, you can create a world and a structure that enables you to adhere to whatever sleep pattern it is you need. And so I think this is important for shift workers, right? I also think this is important for us poor night owls that are forced to be early birds. I'm sorry for us, but it's okay. It's the way the world turns. So why don't we jump back into a few more questions, because we're starting to close up a little bit of our time and I want to make sure we get to everyone. I have seen a few questions just in regards to how much time people should be sleeping. And I briefly want to address this, right? Like, I think the standard advice has always been 8 hours, right? There are some people that need less, there's some people that need more, but I think we should give a little bit of a nod to different points in your life, you'll need different amounts of sleep. There's some evidence in particular that people in their 30s, or oftentimes when they have children, they're very able of using less sleep in general, right? May not feel good, but they can. As you get older, that will also change. But there's also some new and interesting evidence really that speaks to women needing a bit more sleep. Now that we've kind of divided groups up, said men sleep over here, women sleep over here, and let's study this. We know that women by and large need a little bit more, and that will definitely change over the course of your cycle if you're still menstruating. With the first half, that happy little estrogen half, you don't use much. Second half with all your progesterone, a lot more. Yeah, any other comments, Dr. Lara, Justin, before we move on to another question?
Yeah, actually a little bit. So I'll just speak to the hormonal side of things as far as anabolic hormones are concerned. I mean, melatonin is an anabolic hormone. It's the only anabolic hormone you can just go buy, in the West. To your point, Dr. K. I think that as you age, getting that growth hormone release becomes more and more important as far as like how you age and how you feel when you age, because naturally your growth hormone levels are going to drop. So if they're already dropping naturally, and then you also sleep like crap, they're going to drop that much more, and it's going to accelerate your rate of aging. So I think, again, quality versus the actual amount of time, the hours and minutes, I think quality matters a little bit more. But I do think that in general, as you age, you should be paying more and more and more attention to getting that quality restoration, because growth hormone is going to have an anti-aging effect. So that's just my two bits on that. I think growth hormone matters a lot.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of hormones, I mean, we make testosterone when we sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're not really making it very well. And hormones will run the show. So we really want to support that. And kind of jumping to the other aspect of sleep and mental health, especially when it starts getting into neurodegenerative diseases and Alzheimer's, deep sleep in general, which, by the way, and I saw this question come up a couple times, how much deep sleep do we need? Well, it's when you're looking at your sleep, the amount of sleep, say roughly, 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours, you want to have about 20 to 24% of your entire sleep be deep sleep. That really would be optimal. So if you're getting an hour and a half, 2 hours of deep sleep, fantastic. This is wonderful. And it's the same type with REM, the same, like percentages. I mean, there will be times they'll be much lower. But that's really your optimal sweet spot. But the importance of deep sleep and the mental health aspect is that when you are in deep sleep, especially, your glial cells in the brain will actually shrink up to 60% their size. And what happens, it's almost like a dishwasher effect with cerebral spinal fluid, cleaning the brain. It's removing these protein deposits, the beta amyloids, the tau proteins that have been associated with Alzheimer's. They get cleaned out and then drained. And if you are not allowing your body time to do that, that space and that time, that's not occurring. You're not getting that house cleaning of the brain done. And this has been done and shown for people with neurodegenerative diseases that they have very little to no deep sleep. Their sleep structure is very dysregulated. So just another aspect of why, sleep and kind of watching and tracking that and knowing, what you can do that does help. Because you can say, oh, well, I go to sleep and I sleep and, that's that subjectiveness. And I do not want to dismiss the subjective feeling of, oh, I feel like crap in the morning, or, oh, I feel fantastic. But to have the objective data saying, oh, well, you may feel okay, but you really didn't get enough of this type of sleep. You may not feel it right away because Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative diseases take decades in the work.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it now, you will when you get, further down the road. And we want to avoid that. That's what this is for, is prevention.
I like the idea of data tracking in part because there was a study that looked at how refreshed do you feel in the morning. And there was an element, to an extent, right? An element that independent of the quality of sleep and the duration of sleep. So independent of the big good things we're chasing, right? Your experience of sleep, i.e. how did you sleep last night? That very subjective answer is more based on when you wake up relative to your sleep cycles. So if you wake up in deep sleep, even if you had a long, really good sleep, if you wake up in the middle of deep sleep, you're not going to feel great. You're going to be like, I don't think I slept at all. Compared to, someone who's maybe sleeps 4 hours and it wasn't good sleep to begin with, but they wake up in a lighter stage of sleep. They're like, oh, I'm doing good. So there's an element of subjectivity when it comes to your experience of sleep. And sometimes that's very helpful, right? You only have time for 4 hours, you wake up in a light sleep, that's a great thing. But overall, especially to Dr. Lara's point, when we talk about how do we preserve health in the long term, having data to know truly how are you going into your sleep, how is it beyond just the subjective feeling in the morning is important. Yeah. So let's move on to another question. Belva, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but Belva made a comment that they had a very traumatic experience in their childhood, really attached to the time of in and around 3. And so there's a lot of inborn trauma within body and mind that they're now kind of consistently waking up in and around that time, right? And then very reasonably, because it's attached to that trauma, really struggling to fall back asleep. And so they're wondering if there's anything that can be done there to support that, to ease that trauma a little bit, as well as separately to kind of speak through how do we go back to sleep. So Belva, just my heart aches for you because I can't imagine having to navigate that and then being reminded of it every night in the sense of what happened, as well as this frustration of it. So my heart hurts for you. I think we can offer a few thoughts here, namely, especially what are some, maybe Dr. Lara and Justin can offer their kind of favorite tool and technique for when you wake up in a bit of a panic, how to calm down. But I would sincerely offer, be it with us, be it with a different practitioner, engaging with someone, because I would offer the support and the solution to that, both of which are possible, are not going to kind of be just simple sleep hacks. I think it needs to be a little bit more of an encompassing support plan, right? That incorporates body work, that incorporates mind work, and that really incorporates understanding the foundations of your health so that you can take on both that body and mind work. Right? I think sometimes when we think through trauma work, we forget that we have to have a healthy, good body to really seed that work and make sure it's supportive and helpful. So I don't know if you want to contact us, please. We'd love to be of support. So maybe we'll offer a few tips of if you're waking up panicked in the middle of the night, because that tends to be the theme right now. People can't sleep, want to know how they get back to sleep. But I would offer it's going to have to be a little bit of a larger plan. Than just kind of a little bit of supports for when you wake up in the moment. That said, Belva's asking this, Terry's asking this, 90% of the people on the podcast are asking this. So I wonder if we close this up, we go around the table here and we offer, you're waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning with a sense of panic for whatever reason it might be. What are your go-tos? What's your number one go-to in order to calm the body down to support sleep again?
All right, so a couple of go-tos for that. One would be, there's a thing called Zen spray. I think it's from Quicksilver Scientific, if I'm not mistaken, and that's a company I have a lot of respect for, quality of their ingredients. And it's a spray, and so it's going to activate, parasympathetic activity pretty quickly. Taking capsules, the problem is it's going to take a while, right, for it to actually work its way and get into your brain and these different things. So the GABA cream that I mentioned earlier, as well as that Zen spray together, it's like a 1-2 punch for the nervous system to get it calm as quickly as possible. I also mentioned Yoga Nidra. Now that's a way of mimicking a nap, but it's also a way of kind of making up for whatever that period of time might look like that you're laying there friggin' contemplating the universe like Justin. So GABA cream, Zen spray, and Yoga Nidra. All of those are very good. I also, just to really quickly comment on the trauma piece, stuff like scream therapy, like there's actually a lot of things that you can do to kind of activate this weird, primal thing in your body that helps you to get over traumas. I agree with you, Dr. K, that it's going to be a larger case study for something like that. But just remember that, God/universe, let's call it, gives the toughest tests to its toughest soldiers, right? So have some respect for yourself that you survived, whatever you're referencing there in the first place. And now all we can do is press forward with positive thought, positive action, positive energy, and be an asset to those around you. Trauma is a prerequisite to your life's purpose often. So if you're able to find those answers, you're going to have them for everybody else that you encounter to pass them on, so much respect to you on that one, and look into that stuff like scream therapy. I'm a huge fan of things like martial arts, boxing, grappling, something to up your confidence, make you feel safe and secure within yourself. Weightlifting will make you superhuman. There's all these different things that if you did end up being my client, for example, that we would work on, because confidence is a kryptonite to anxiety. Right. So we got to build that up within you, and it's going to emanate from the inside out. So those are a couple of my little go-tos. But yeah, look up the Zen spray if you happen to wake up in the middle of the night, and then use the GABA cream as well. Box breath, all the above.
Before we pass the mic to Dr. Lara, Justin, just before we let you go, the GABA cream. This is probably one of the most popular demands tonight. What GABA cream were you referencing when you mentioned the topical GABA?
That's the problem, is I can't remember the friggin' brand name. It was actually on
you, child.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It was one of the Ben Greenfield podcasts that he did about sleep, and he talked about GABA, how it has difficulty passing the blood-brain barrier if you just take it in capsule form. So there's different ways to take GABA. I mentioned that
blood-brain, the gut. It's a big thing. It's unless you got leaky gut, it shouldn't be getting through.
Yeah, and there's also that Newcom device has those little GABA discs that you put on your wrist, and it apparently bypasses that as well. But there's a transdermal cream of mystery origin that I cannot recall. That's one that I would look at, but it was in one of his transcripts of the Ben Greenfield podcast. So look that up, perhaps.
Okay. So for the audience out there, before we pass it to Dr. Lara, what we'll do is we'll figure this out, and in the show notes when we put this onto YouTube, and did you find it? Oh,
I did.
Oh, she's the best. Thank you. All right. So on that moment of glory that you've just saved the entire audience from frantically Googling this, thank you for being our savior this evening. Would you like to offer us your favorite 3 a.m. I woke up but I'm not happy about it support?
Well, I would say there's a couple different things that you can do. Actually, Justin did mention the breathing, because really what's happening, especially in the situation of the question, your sympathetic nervous system, you are in a fight or flight. So you need to calm that nervous system down. You need to get yourself back into that parasympathetic state. So breathing, which we've already talked about at the beginning of this webinar, is a wonderful way to do that. If you want to use some sort of device for a much quicker get there, just in case, the Relief by Coolest. It's a little device. You put it on the vagus nerve. I mean, a couple different places you can put it, like behind the ear or by the carotid artery here. And that can immediately stimulate that vagus nerve. That puts you in the parasympathetic state much more quickly. Something that I use, again, my brain tap. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm having a hard time falling back asleep, or I'm just stressed or whatever, I always have it on the side of my bed. I grab it and I put on, one of the sessions for that calm, relaxed, because you get not only the sound, the light, they have binaural beats, so that can help with the brain waves and relax you. I would say, I mean, obviously the GABA is always something but like Justin alluded to, if you go with pill form, you are looking at anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes before it really kicks in and gets it. So you want something that is either a sublingual, transdermal, or a mist going into the nose, because it's the closest to the brain to have the effects. But ultimately, you've got to get to the root issue. And that is the much deeper work. And I noticed someone mentioning EMDR. Yes, that could help. There are so many different techniques, internal family systems, doing other types of therapies, but you really need to fix that deep-rooted, deep-seated trauma. So I highly encourage you, and anyone out there who's got some really difficult traumas that are affecting their life and their health at this time, to seek professional help, therapies with professionals that can help you. And if you're not sure, going, I don't even know what types of therapies are out there, who, where, what, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And he actually walks through and talks about this. And he describes the different types of techniques and even places and links to where you can go to find practitioners. So that's a resource that you can actually take a look at. And I personally will extend my prayers and wishes and blessings upon all of you going through these traumas, that you find the peace, the hope, the healing that you need. So I also want to thank you all for coming here tonight, for learning, for discussing, for sharing. This is why we are here. We are building a community for education, for health, for support, and you all are part of that. So thank you.
I think on that beautiful note, that is where we start to taper off. Just to quickly offer my thought on, that 3 a.m. wake up, I don't want to offer additional tools. What I would offer, especially people who kind of chronically experience this, it's a consistent. I think sometimes simply the act of waking up and being like, shoot, this is happening again, can further feed that panic and further offset and make it difficult. So I would offer, this sounds silly, but I've seen it effective with a few people, is flipping the script a little bit, almost anticipating, if you're I'm going to qualify this. This is while you're working towards figuring out why it's happening. This is not dismissing it and pretending it doesn't exist. And this is in parallel to working to prevent it, but almost an acceptance while you're working towards fixing it. This is going to happen. And almost instead of the moment you realize you're awake, instead of dread and being like, shoot, I encourage people to kind of have a small little quiet thing that they enjoy doing, so that if they wake up, instead of feeling like, shoot, I have to do a laundry list of all these things to get me back to sleep, and oh my gosh, my day tomorrow is going to be ruined, and kind of that snowball impact, finding a tiny little thing that if you're waking up at 3 a.m., you're like, oh, great, I get to do this, right? And maybe only enabling that small thing to be something you do at 3 a.m., right? We don't want to create a relationship where you're excited and trying to wake up at 3 a.m., right? We just want to take away some of that pressure and take away some of that dread for waking up. So I think the breathing techniques are important. I think some of the supplements, some of the brain taps, some of the technologies, they're all really important. But accompanying that, right, is also going to be this idea of how do I get rid of some of the angst around it and finding a small little thing that, oh, I only do this at 3 a.m. And so I'm not going to completely hate myself for being awake right now. Just something to flip over, right? I think sometimes we, just like we don't want to attach, I can't fall asleep, that thought to our bed. We also don't want to attach the thought of dread and shoot, I'm not going to fall back asleep to that first wake up. So having a happy thing to be there and a little bit distracting can be very helpful.
I do want to mention real quick, because I did notice a couple of comments. EMFs were not addressed. We really didn't get to toxins. And I know I briefly mentioned mold in your environment. Sleep is a huge topic that is foundational for good health. So it's going to affect every aspect. And guys, you're absolutely right. Your toxic load will directly affect your sleep. Your sleep will affect your toxic load. And this is the perfect opportunity to have another webinar about this.
Yeah.
Seriously, we could easily talk for an hour and a half just on that and all of the things that can affect your sleep and what you need to look at and what you can do about it to help better your sleep when it comes to toxic loads. So yeah, I think that this would be a wonderful topic for us to focus on within sleep for another webinar.
You said it, and so it shall be. We'll make sure that happens, and we'll make sure that on this replay, wherever this replay is housed in the YouTubes of the world, we link to that as well, and we'll make sure it's advertised so that you guys know to join us for part 2 of all things glorious in sleep. So I'll take a moment to thank Dr. Laura, Justin. Thank you guys so very much for your time and your support and your wisdom. The kindness and compassion and the passion and dedication that you offer, not only everyone at the DNA company, but everyone that's joining here this evening. I thank the audience for coming, and we're grateful that we get to be privileged and part of your health journey. If you need support from us, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to serve. That's the purpose of these times. So we want to make sure our medicine, our science is as accessible to you guys as possible. So on behalf of the 3 of us, on behalf of the real star of the show, Napita, we wish you a wonderful, here she comes. We wish you a wonderful evening, guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Say bye. Say au revoir. Say au revoir.